You've heard athletes, you've heard actors, you've heard other celebrities speak out about their mental health, but chances are you have not heard from many in the business community, business leaders. They don't say much about this subject. Andy Dunn, though, is different. He's co-founder of the men's clothing retailer Bonobos, and he's working to change the stigma around mental illness. He's sharing his experience with bipolar disorder, which he's kept hidden until now. In a brave and candid new memoir, Burn Rate, Launching a Startup and Losing My Mind, he tackles the stigma surrounding mental illness in the business world. And he writes, let's, for everyone's sake, stop pretending that it's not here, that we're not here. Andy Dunn is with us this morning, and we're glad about that. You write in the front of this book that this is not a guide for entrepreneurs. It's not about how to launch your startup. It really is a book about mental health.
Yeah.
And the last taboo, the business community doesn't talk about this. Why did you decide to do it?
Well, it's funny, when my editor first heard the pitch, he said he rejected it. He said, if Andy is looking to write a chest-thumping memoir about being an entrepreneur, I'm not interested. But if you're willing to tell a story, an unvarnished story about mental illness that happens to be told through the lens of an entrepreneur, then maybe I'm in.
Yeah, you call it a ghost story, and the ghost being your mental health challenges, your bipolar disorder. When did that haunting, to keep the metaphor intact, start?
22 years ago. So I was a senior in college. I ended up with messianic delusions, elevated speech patterns. I stopped eating. I stopped drinking. I was up, we think, for sleeping for 4 nights in a row.
Wow.
And I ended up hospitalized in the psychiatric ward. I spent a week there. I came back down to earth thanks to medication. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1. And then what happened was tragic, which is we just buried it. We decided it hadn't happened. I'd used psilocybin mushrooms for the first time a few weeks earlier. And everyone just hung their hat that that was the reason for the psychosis, when in fact, while substance abuse and mental illness can be intersecting, it didn't mean that the bipolar disorder wasn't there.
In fact, you had two professionals tell you that you probably didn't have bipolar disorder, that it was a one-off episode, that it's not something you need to worry about. But I echo what Tony says about how brave I think it is for you to reveal this. Number one, I did not know your story, Andy. When you said losing my mind, I thought it meant the struggles in putting a startup together.
The stress of being a business.
Yes,
right?
that's exactly what I thought, Nate. And then I start reading, and I go, holy, I can't believe how candid you are in the things that happened to you. When you talk about bipolar, you said it's a forever diagnosis. There is no cure. There's a bomb in your brain that could go off at any time. So I'm wondering how you live today knowing this, that it's a bomb in your brain that could go off at any time.
Yeah, so on exit, the diagnosing psychiatrist said something in retrospect tragic. She said, if Andy doesn't have another event for the next 5 years, it could be that this was a one-off psychotic event.
Yeah.
And we as a family hung our hat on that. And then the worst possible thing happened, which I was asymptomatic for 10 years. And then I started dealing with catatonic depression and suicidal ideation during the time of building a startup, until in 2016, this second manic episode struck. Wow. And I spent a week in Bellevue Hospital. Finally, everyone was clear-eyed. I had my girlfriend come in, my parents and sister and all these loved ones. I walked out ready to deal with it, and I walked straight out into handcuffs.
Yes.
And I was arrested for felony and misdemeanor assault in an episode of violence during the mania. And that was the wake-up call.
Blacked out for.
You don't remember.
Exactly.
And when you talk about you considered suicide not to end your life, but to end the depression, there's a difference.
There's a difference. They say hunger is because you eat because you want to end the act of being hungry. And so what's been so sad as the books come out is I've gotten all these notes from so many families where they have mental illness in the family, bipolar disorder in the family, and so frequently those folks are gone. You know, the suicide attempt rate for bipolar 1 is 60%. The suicide rate is 20%. And so really it is, you've got to survive. And that means therapy. That means medication daily, and it is
both.
forever.
You said therapy's not enough.
But that's right. You need both.
Yeah.
This book describes the intersection between mental illness and entrepreneurship. Yeah. What advice would you give to individuals out there that are trying to build a business? I feel like we have more active minds trying to be young businessmen and women today more now than ever.
Yeah.
But some of them do lose their mind in the
fact,
process.
Entrepreneurs seem to have higher rates of
No
depression, anxiety, and even bipolar.
Someone who's been through it, what advice would you give those people?
So first, I think it's just we need to acknowledge there's a relationship between creativity and disorder. And we've noticed it in the entertainment world. We're starting to talk about it in sports, but in business, we're not.
That's strong.
And so I think the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that it's there, and then make the space for people to disclose their issue.
Yeah.
We need to normalize disclosure.
Without judge it.
And so that's kind of the first step.
Because you
is
say, no
disclosing.
one says I am cancer. They said I have cancer.
Yeah, I mean,
Terminology is important.
That is key.
it's so important. I was told I am bipolar. Even when I wrote the book, I wrote it. And then it's like, well, wait a second. I am not bipolar.
I have
bipolar disorder in the same way that someone isn't cancer.
Right.
They have cancer.
Yeah.
Right.
And the business world is hungry for stability, and that's why there's such a stigma around this. But talking about it and showing you still can perform at a high level and there's life after is really what makes this book so important.
No
He's
doubt.
married with a baby.
Yeah.
You
Congratulations.
two got through all of that together, and you're married
We
with.
did. My wife, Manuela, she stuck by me through this, and you can imagine, after what we went through with the violence, I struck her during that episode. The fact that
And her
she stayed
mom.
with me, that her mom said, Andy, it's just like diabetes. You got to take care of yourself. It was really healing.
That's the way to put it. That's true. I can
Thank
see the
you,
gratitude
Andy.
on your
Thank you.
face. Andy Dunn, thank you very much. The book is
Bravo.
Burn Rate. It's brave. It's on sale right now. Pick it up.